Today is Gimel Kyslev. I wanted to announce again that today's broadcast and the entire week's broadcast is sponsored by Rafal, the Nishmash's mother, Ya'nטע, P'raiדא, Baliמא, Bas, Rafal Avraham, whose baby in Yortzeit is today, in the Shabbos and all of her family should be a big success for all of her family. They should be blessed with only simchas. Today is the day Chashmonaim were successful in removing all of the avodah zarah from the Beis Hamikdash, and it's listed as a Yom Tov in Megillas Tanis as one of the days that it's usher to fast. It was also the day that the Kazakhs was launched. So a lot of difficult things happened on this day today. Kazakhs were launched, which led to the murder of between 100,000 and 500,000 Eden. And the Aro Dafei, which was the burning at stake that the Spanish Inquisition treated Yidden to, the first recorded Aro Dafei in South America, the Western world, happened in Lima, Peru, in 1581. It's also the Yortzeit of a lot of people today, but it's like the Yortzeit of Mrs. Adele, but it's also the Yortzeit of the first Square Rabbi, Rabbi Heschel Tversky, who was an anical of the Abderov, Rabbi Heschel. And he got married so young because there was a difference between when his father got married very young, because he was 14 years younger than his father. That means he was born when his father was 14. His father wore a talis, ibn and cup, before he wore tefillin. Because his father got married at 12. It lends credence to the famous joke they say over in Satmar, where there was a whole bunch of bar mitzvah boys and chasadim that had to have aliyahs that Shabbos, and they asked the Rebbe, who should we give the aliyahs to? So he says, I don't know, you have a question between the chassan and the bar mitzvah boy, whoever's older, you'll give it to. So the Rabbi Heschel, the Square Rebbe, his father got married at 12 years old. I'm not sure how that works. If he can make a kedushin, but he was wearing a talis before he was wearing tefillin. I'm not going to try to understand that, but that's what it is. Today is also the Yortzeit of Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Kalevsky, who was a Rebbe many years and a Rosh Yeshiva in the Baltimore Yeshiva. He was my Rebbe's Rebbe. My Rebbe, Rabbi Tzad Perman, was a Talmud of Kalevsky, and he used to always talk about the unbelievable blot shear that Rabbi Kalevsky used to give. And I remember what Rabbi Kalevsky said when he spoke by the Levaya of Eruvin. And he told over to the people at Levaya, he said over that when I became a Rebbe in Yeshiva of Baltimore, I felt icky a little bit because all of my day I had to spend preparing my shir. I never learned. I never really learned at all because my whole day was dedicated to preparing a shir for yeshiva. So I went to Eruvin and I told him I don't feel right. I'm not learning at all. My whole life is just preparing the shir. So he said Rav Ruderman, Zatzal, told him over something that he saw in the Hakdama of the Aflo. And it says, Im doime rabach l'malach Hashem tevakos oz tevakesh Torah mipiyu. If your Rebbe is like a malach, then you should learn from him. What does it mean your Rebbe is like a malach? So he said a malach has only one mission, one purpose in life. And that's all he has to do. If your Rebbe is like a malach, meaning that all he does the whole day is focus on preparing for the shir and preparing to be the Rebbe, that's good enough. That's someone who can learn Torah from. So he said, it made me feel much better because Rosh Yeshiva told me that there's nothing wrong if I'm focusing all my energy just on preparing shir and enough time to learn anything else, because that's what a Rebbe is supposed to be, like the Haflah said. So it made him feel much better. I think eventually he found a lot of extra time to learn a lot of things, but at the beginning, I guess when you're a Rebbe, it's very, very overwhelming.
Don't you learn much better when you have? Don't you learn much better when you have to teach? Yes, when you have to give a shir. Okay, so what was his problem?
His problem is that he wasn't learning his own thing. He was just learning to prepare for his shir. So let's say he was learning Perek Meruba, so that's all he did, but he wasn't able to learn anything else. I guess he wanted to also broaden his horizon, but that was the story. Okay, We are up to Kuf Beis. Today's daf is Kuf Beis. We're Omer ahead, and it looks like we're going to end up finishing the Masechta on Shabbos, and we're going to be starting Pesachim on Sunday, which is very exciting. So I want to make. I know there are some people that will be joining us for Pesachim. We're very excited. We have some extra joiners, and I urge everybody to get as many people to join. Tell them that they don't have to come to shul right away. They can start off in bed, and if they like it, then they can join.
When is still saying that?
That's right.
When does the whole world start something?
No, I think so. I think we finish on Shabbos. I think Shabbos is the last day. So I urge everybody to join. It'll be very good. I also sent out Al Daf is having a contest for anybody who starts Pesachim and finishes Pesachim with the Daf Yomi. They're raffling off a vacation to California, including wine tasting at the Oxnard, California, the Kedem place. So I would love if we all sign up. There's no cost to sign up. We could all sign up. If one of us wins, then we can say, we need to come all along together, right? So if we don't win a 649, at least maybe we'll win a tour of the Oxnard winery together. Okay, so the Ohel Gemara. So we were talking about a stagecoach on a ship. So Hani Kipa the Arbas. Hani Kipa the Arba. There was a ship, and they used to make it like a stagecoach. So what they would do is, I don't think it's called a stagecoach, it's called a covered wagon. So they would put a series of arches across from one end of the boat to the other end of the boat, so that they could then spread a shmata over it to create like a cover, a canopy. So Hanakiba de Arba, Bisman Sheyesh Bahem Tefach, if each arch is a tefach, meaning each arch is already an oil. So by putting those arches on the boat before Shabbos, there's already an oil there, or Inami Ebal Tefach, even though in each arch there's not a tefach of wood, but the Ein Ben Zela Zeh Shloisha, but they're all within 3 tefachim of each other, and therefore you say loved. So you look at it like it's one large arch. So there's already an arch in place. There's already an oil in place. Lamachar on Shabbos, maybe machzelas, you're allowed to bring ashmata, uparis aleim, and spread it over the arches, which will support the mat and create a better oil. My time, why are you allowed to do it? You're actually making oil. You're adding to an oil aray. The arches are an oil aray. Maybe, we'll see. But you're definitely adding oil aray to this oil, and therefore there's not an issue. So the question is, there's a lot of questions that arise out of this. This is the heter that's used to lower a shlak down on Shabbos. We leave it open at tefach, and the Mefarshim say, let's say your pipe that your shlak wraps around, let's say that rolled up is a tefach, that's not good enough. It actually has to be unrolled, that there's an unrolled portion of at least a tefach there. So we'll say that there's already an oil area there, and then you're allowed to be moisture on the oil, you're allowed to lower the shlak down or roll it up on Shabbos. That's where that heter comes from.
I thought it's because it already is an oil. You have the schach covering it.
I don't know. You're suggesting the schach itself is an oil, so just an oil above it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It says that it's attached and it's meant to go up and down. That's why an umbrella that's in a picnic table that's in Chubur Lakarka can be open and closed on Shabbos.
Exactly what the roast is.
You're allowed, like on a patio table, as long as it's a tefach when it's closed.
That's another reason why. In Chubur, and it's meant to be open and closed, just like a carriage. Carriage is open and closed.
And the same thing with the carriage, why you're allowed to open the cabin, only if it's a tefach, fold it up.
No, so I'm telling you.
The Rosh says even if it's not?
There's another reason for the heter. He didn't come up with that idea.
It's attached.
Right.
Attached, Chubur, and to open and close.
So it's not like you're adding on to the oil. The oil is there all the time.
Like a door.
I hear. So there's actually a big machlokes achronim.
To understand this closed tefach, not that you have it almost open completely and then another tefach to go
Correct.
close it. You know, when it's folded and it's
As long as there's only a tefach left, that's good enough to say that we're being moisture al oil
something
iron.
that gets folded and put away, you can't reopen it. If you have a tent at home.
Correct.
you can't open it.
Correct.
You
Correct.
live with it.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So there's actually a big machlokes achronim about umbrellas. So the Noida Yehuda holds that avad on umbrella would be aser because it's not open to tefach at all, and it's building an oil. But the Chasam Sofer holds that it's not so poshut that you're not allowed to open up an umbrella on Shabbos. And he has three reasons why it for sure wouldn't be a deraisa. A is the oil is not stationary; it's mobile. That's not called a proper oil. B is that it's made to open and close, like what you said. And three is it doesn't have walls. So the Chasam Sofer is not so. I don't know if he passes a law much you're allowed to open up an umbrella, but he definitely holds it's not a davar chomer at all. Now then there's a shaila. Then there's another shaila. This halacha that moishav al oil arai, does that mean that the original oil has to be arai, and then you can extend that? Or what about if the main oil is permanent, and you just want to extend it with an oil arai? So what is the heter of the Gemara? The whole oil is on arai, and you're extending it, and that's why it's mutter. Or if the extension is arai, even though the main oil is not arai, then it would also work. So it actually is totally in the machlokes of achronim, and it's actually a shaila on how you read the Gemara. There are those who read the Gemara moisef al oil, comma arayu v'shaper damei, or it's moisef al oil arai who v'shaper damei. So the question is how you read the Gemara. Do you read the Gemara to being moisef on the oil with a dover arai that would be good, or is it shot the whole oil has to be arai? And it's only mutter to be moisef on the oil arai. The Mishabur actually passes l'kula that if you have a permanent oil and only the extension is arai, that would also be allowed. Zogt Ohel Gemara weiter. Hani dichri, the habalei l'Rav Huna. Huna had these goats. I believe dichri are goats. The biyamama during the day they were under the blazing sun. Bo tula, they needed shade. They needed some type of shelter. But at night it was stuffy there. Bo avira. If anything, they needed to remove the cover because they wanted it to be airy. Asala kamei the Rav. They came in front of Rav to ask him the shaila what to do. Amalei, he said, Zil kroich budja. V'shayir v'atevach. What you could do is tie up the roof, but leave a tevach extended. And then, l'mocher, during the day where you need shade, pashta, you could spread it back out. U'moisef al oil araihu. Again, the question is where to put the comma. You make moisef al arai, v'shaper dami, and that would be allowed. Amarav mishum rabchia. Vilay. Now we're talking about a curtain which is a horizontal, which is a vertical plane. Mutal and toisai, umutal aparka v'shabbos. You're allowed to open it and close it on Shabbos. So this is actually subject to a big shaila as to why. We learned a little while ago, we were talking about closing up a window, and there was a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi held that even on a wall, if you close it and open it, it's called building an oil. Tosfos learned at that point in the Gemara that it had to be a skylight. You're only called making an oil if it's on a horizontal plane, and it's like covering you. So this villain here, why would it be mutter l'toisei mutter l'forka b'Shabbos? So Rashi says something very interesting. Rashi says two things. A is the lav oil. It's not an oil. The loy kivia hasam, because it's not permanent. Ela kain darkoi, that's its derech linosayin l'stala kedelas balmut. It's like a regular door that's designed to open and close, which I think is the heter that Chaim Tzvi was referring to when he said that since this is the way it operates, that's why you're allowed to open those patio umbrellas, because that's how it's designed to open and close like a curtain that opens and closes. But what does Rashi say? Why is it mutter? The lav oil who? The loy kavia hasam, it's not kavia. It's not kavu there. Ela kedaker linasa l'stala kedelas balmut. It's made to put and to remove. So the shaila is, there was a shaila in the Rechronim that discusses are you allowed to open up the pareiches of an Aron Kodesh on Shabbos? Because there it is kavu hasam. So if it is Kavua Hasam, are you allowed to be opening up the pareiches? So most of the Achronim say there's any way it's not considered Kaviyah because most Aron Kodeshes, besides the pareiches, have a proper set of doors behind it. So they're not really the doors that are opening and closing anything. The doors are really the wooden doors, and the pareichas is just a covering over it. And that's why we hold for sure you're allowed to open up a pareichas. And there is actually a shaila in Achronim. What would be if you didn't have doors? You only had a pareichas. Are there any shuls that you know of that has an Aron Kodesh without doors?
Interesting Aron Kodesh, Buffalo. The Buffalo shul has these
Curtains that open.
It's not curtains. It's a door,
Right.
and then behind the door is a gate, a shade. Sort of thing. But before davening, I'm never there on Shabbos, but they open up that inside gate. It's also a security gate. So all it is these doors.
But it is a door.
You can see right.
It's
Right?
like out.
Yeah, it's very
It's like
interesting.
a crevice out of the wall.
Yeah.
I don't understand. So now, you took care of the pareichas because the pareichas has doors. So now the shaila is on the doors.
No, door you're allowed to open. The door and the hinges that we know for sure you're allowed to open.
So then why
We
can't you
discussed that.
open-
It's connected. It's not doesn't fall off, right? It's permanently on.
Why can't you open up the pareichas? Pareichas is also connected. It's acting like a door.
I'm not sure why the shaila is there. I'm not sure the details of the shaila, but I know they still to this Rashi to it that it's only mutter because it's not an oil and it's not kaviyah hasam. I'm sorry. I hear. Okay, Zok Ohel Gemara. Zok Ohel Gemara. The dik is from kaviyah hasam. It seems like Rashi says that the only reason why, in the case of Rav Huna, that it was mutter was not Rav Huna. The reason why, according to Rav Chia, it was mutter is because it's not kavu there. But something that's kavu there would be a problem. So someone spreading a shmata over it, that's not called kaviyah. But a pareichus, which is there permanently, would not have Rashi's heter of lo kaviyah.
You would have opened the curtain for the shower, in front of the shower curtain that's like opening something, same thing.
It seems so. I mean, and according to Rashi, that unless it's not kavua there, it's a problem. Then there's a din over here. But there might be other reasons why the shower curtain is mutter.
Then it is mutter.
There might be other reasons. I just know that the Achronim do make a deal from Rashi that says the loy kaviyah hasam, that you need that it should not be kavua there as part of the heter to allow you to open the curtain. There's probably other factors involved as well. Okay, so let's see what the Ohel Gemara says later. Kilas chasanim. What about this canopy bed that they would use for chasanim? Now you're going to see here that chasanim in those days must have been very fit and slim. We're going to see that soon. It's not just a high-tech where a chassan loses weight before his chasna. You're going to see that it was in those days as well. So kilas chasanim mutalo farka ulum toisha b'Shabbos. So if you look at the article picture, it's basically like a tent that's made over the bed. They put a post up at the foot of the bed. They put a post up at the head of the bed. They run the horizontal beam across, and then they put a shmata over it. So it creates the formation of a tent over the bed. So you're allowed to put that shmata on and take it off on Shabbos. There's no problem of making an oil. Omer Absheshes Prayda Vidi. Loy Omra. This that we say that you're allowed to do that is Ela She'ein Begago Tefach. The top beam cannot be a tefach wide. So for the cross beam, if you're using a 2x4, which is only about 3.5 inches, I think that's less than a tefach. So you'd be able to use it. But if you want to use a 2x8 as a top, now the top portion would be more than a tefach. That tefach makes it into an oil. Since that tefach makes it into an oil, you would not be allowed to set that up and dismantle it on Shabbos.
Why did the Chassanim have such a funny bed?
Why did they use such a bed in those days?
We're all talking about Chassanim. Regular people didn't have such a bed.
It was called Akilas Chasanim. It was called the Chassan's bed. I mean,
So only Chassanim.
it's like the college chair by Kabbalah Spadim. That's what they use. Does that mean nobody ever uses that chair? I don't know.
Yeah, nobody ever uses such a big fat white chair.
It could be a green chair. It could be a big fat green chair that people use.
No, it's called a bed that
So why do they? Maybe it's extra sneers. Maybe it's just it's adornment. Chasanim.
this is adornment. This funny looking tent is adornment.
In those days, I guess that was considered nice. Or could be in those days there was insects around and stops the insects from falling into the bed.
Absolutely right. Then if you're talking, which is what I thought, but if that's the case, then everybody should have such a bed.
I hear. It's a good question. I don't know how the culture worked. So the halach is if there is a tefach, a flat tefach on top, like the Amma, Techalenim Umayla on the Teva, then it would be a problem. However, if there's no tefach, it's not a problem. V'chi ein begag tefach, there's more restrictions. And even if the top is not a tefach wide, it's under a tefach, lo yamor, and we wouldn't allow it, ela she'ein bepachas mishloisha samuch legag tefach. We have a concept called lovut. So anything that's within 3 tefachim of something is considered in the same place. So if as the tent gets wider and wider as you come down off the peak, if at the point where there's a tefach of width, it's within 3 tefachim of the top, then we also look at it as if that tefach of width is at the top. So therefore, unless it's a very pointy incline, if it doesn't open up a lot, then you'll be okay. However, if by the time you're 3 tefachim below the peak, you're already a tefach wide, you're still going to have a problem. So lo yamin el shein bepachas mishloisha samach l'gag tefach. Aval yesh bepachas mishloisha samach l'gag tefach aser, that would also be aser. And I believe they show pictures of that here as well. Let's see where he shows the pictures. I think it's in there. Yeah, he shows it over here. So if you're within 3 of the top, and at that point it's already a tefach wide, you're also going to have a problem. So you cannot, as it becomes wider and wider to reach either side of the bed, it could not reach a width of a tefach until it's 3 tefachim away from the top, which would mean it would have to be a very, very tall thing because you have such a slim incline that and in order for it to be wide enough to have a bed underneath it, it would take a long time. And the house it's getting worse. It's getting worse. This is just the starvation diet. Now we're going to have a starvation diet with a triathlon to make it work.
The higher it goes, the wider the bed should be, right?
The higher it goes, the wider. We're going to so far. Because so far the only restriction is that within 3 tefachim can't be a tefach. But it doesn't. So it seems like as long as you're really high, you can still go really wide. That's what we're holding now. And now we're going to have the final nail in the bed. That's going to show you can't do that either. So Zot Gemar Biter, and even v'chi'ein b'pachas mishloisha samach l'gag tefach nami lo yamrin ela she'ein b'shipua tefach. That means from you have the flat piece on top. It's less than a tefach, right? From that flat piece on either end, if I draw a line going straight down, an imaginary line going straight down, from there to the edge of the bed cannot be more than a tefach. So if you add it up, that means you have on either side you have a section of less than a tefach, and then you have the top center could be less than a tefach. So 3 times less than a tefach is just under 3 tefachim. So at the end of the day, the maximum width that this bed could have is less than 3 tefachim.
Yes,
If I balance, I probably will be able to not roll off the bed, but it's not going to work very well. And that's what Rashi's kasha is. Rashi's kasha is, by the time you're done, even a triathlon couldn't sleep on such a bed. And don't forget, the chassan is not there by himself. So it's not going to work. It's called the doghouse. It should be called the doghouse bed. So how you talking? Right, he didn't start yet. So Zok Rashi, it must be that you have multiples of this arrangement on top of your bed.
But this is only for Shabbos, right?
Well, it's only on Shabbos that you're not allowed to put it together and take it apart. So on Shabbos you can't do it. I guess they wanted to be able to take it apart and put it together on Shabbos. So Rashi tells us that in essence what they had was this. They had a series of these tents on top of his bed. So therefore each tent had less than 3 tefachim width. But he can have a king size bed that's 50 tefachim wide as long as each section is less than 3 tefachim
You just can't get in because those poles are a tefach apart.
I think the purpose is after they get into the bed, they put that there so that they can't escape. Maybe that's what it's for.
But there's essentially walls between all these tents because of the shmata.
No, there doesn't have to be a wall because at the top it goes up, down, up, down. The center pieces don't have to come all the way down to the bed. The 2 sides come down to the sides of the bed. So that's how you get a wider bed out of it. Okay.
The one thing that's strange, Yosy, is that when we talked about the schlock, and when you said at least it's a tefach, in the closed position it's a tefach.
Correct.
And then you can open it here, the cross beam has to be less than a tefach. You would think if it's a tefach, it's already in oil. So now it's moist of oil, all right.
Yeah, but the problem is here you want to take it all apart and put it back together.
But no, but you want to leave, you can leave the wood on top, then you already
So if
have
the
oil.
wood itself was a tefach, so then you already have an oil.
Now you're
Oh,
moist of oil.
asking geweldig. Why can't the top be a tefach? The frame itself.
Today's.
It must be they took apart the frame.
You don't have the head to take it apart. Isn't that binyan?
I'm sorry?
You don't know if you have a head to take apart the frame part.
That would be the same thing.
But if they didn't think about the frame and the frame is a tefach, then in fact you would be right. You were just being moist about the oil. All right.
That's the same thing that Dave brought up. That would be like the sukkah, it was top. It was like the frame, right? And then you have this one.
Moist of oil.
It's a good point. It's a good point. Okay, so let's see what it says. That width, that area, that it extends out past the center line is also part of the oil. Saina shori. Saina is mutter. This is also a very interesting sugya. What is the sign of Rashi? Koveya shalavet. It's a hat with a wide brim. Shekarin feltery. So it's a felt hat. Mutter lotus by Shabbos. You're allowed to walk out with your borsalino on Shabbos. There's a brim. Latanya also you're not allowed to walk out because it has a brim. That's when we're like kasha. Hada is be tefach. If the brim is a tefach, which is enough to make an oil, hada less be tefach. So what is the difference? If it's a tefach, it'll be a problem because it's an oil. If it's less than tefach, so basically, if you wear a current hat that has a small little brim, you're going to be okay. But if you want to wear an ulta with a nice wide brim, then you would not be able to do it. Or a cowboy hat, you wouldn't be able to wear. In fact, if you're wearing the new winter coats, the winter jackets, to take care of the wind, the top hood usually sticks out past your face, right? So it can also stick out a tefach. So if you wear a beged, that's not even a hat. If you're wearing a beged that's loose, that sticks out a tefach, are you going to say that it's also to wear because it's an oil? You can't say that. And there's a big machlokes between Rashi and Tosfos what this means, and it'll actually have an impact on how we wear our hats today. So let's see how Rashi learns. Rashi says, the time of it's for sure not a problem of oil. It's a beged, it's not an oil. The reason why it might be osir, if he has a wide brim, his hat is like a sail, and they can easily blow off his head. If it blows into the street, you're going to go and pick it up. If it's tied well under his chin, sure, it'll be mutter. According to Rashi, there's no problem wearing a hat as long as it's on good that it's not going to blow off into a Rosh Hashanah. So that's probably why our hats do blow off sometimes. But I guess it's not so common. Our hats are on pretty secure, and that's why you're allowed to wear it. So Rashi holds the fact that the beged is more than the tefach is a non-issue. So therefore, you could wear a nice wide brim hat. Tosfos argues. Tosfos says, the time of lav mishum oyalu. According to Rashi, mutarin oisan koivin shalevet. You're allowed to wear those felt hats like we wear. Afalpi shemahel tefach. You take a satman and plachik it's very wide. So even though it's mal over a tefach, you're still allowed to wear it on Shabbos. You just have to make sure it's secure that it won't blow off, because then you're choshesh v'osheli asuye dalaramis b'shusarab. Alvor Rabbeinu Tamar Farish, it's a whole different story. The Mahadik Osor kishatevach hayoytzim in akoyve chazak sheni nikvav. If the brim is rigid, like I think our hats, our brim are pretty rigid, then it will be a problem. Veneer oil. But if it's very floppy, like a tilly hat, so the brim is very floppy, then you would be able to wear it on Shabbos. Zok Tosfos, the way I'm learning, hats are going to be awesome.
Wow.
So there are those who learn. There are those who learn that since we wear a yarmulke, and that's our main covering, then we don't have to worry about because the zachos is like, if it's a beged, there are those who learn that this is only if it's not considered a beged. But if it's considered a beged that people wear, then it shouldn't be a problem anyway. So therefore,
What kind of hat is not a beged?
well, there's two types of things. You wear something to protect you, and that's when you'll have a problem, because then it has a din of an oil, or you're wearing because it's the style. Most of us wear our black hats because that's the style in society. It's not to cover our heads because we wear a yarmulke underneath our hats, and that's really our main head covering. The hat that we wear over it is more as a style. It's not a beged, and therefore there shouldn't be a problem.
Those who wear kippah sruga, it's also a style, right? Why do we wear dark and black?
Right. If you're wearing your hat, if you're wearing a hat as a protection, then you have an issue of oil. But if you're wearing a hat just as a style, then it's not a problem with oil.
But people wear yarmulkes also only as a style.
No, we wear yarmulkes because we have to keep our heads covered.
So we also wear a hat because we have to keep our heads covered.
Yeah, but
If
you don't need two coverings. Yeah, if you're wearing your hat and not your yarmulke, then maybe there'd be some shine. There are people who, when they put their hat on, take off their yarmulke. That's a different story. And most people that wear a yarmulke under their hat, their main beged is the yarmulke. The hat is more as a style, and therefore these problems will not be there.
Our hats blow up all the time, and we all run to pick them up. And okay, we have a Eruvin here.
Right. So again, they rely on the heter that since we're wearing a yarmulke underneath it, the hat's not acting as a beged. The hat's acting more as a style.
Talking about picking it up and carrying it.
Oh, there's a problem that we might carry it. So why isn't there? I'm not sure. Maybe it doesn't happen often enough to be exer.
It's almost like the exer they have with gloves,
That's right.
right?
You're not allowed to wear gloves on Shabbos because you might take it off. Yeah. But they don't make the exer. The fact is we don't have that exer.
I remember.
I guess porcelain
I
was a better
remember
love.
my father getting a hat at
Good lobby.
at the hat.
He said porcelain must
It
have a good
had
lobby.
a little ribbon around it with a button.
Right.
You're supposed to do, take
That's
the
what it's
button
for.
off and put it
That's what
in
that's
the-
for. Yeah, the thing around your hat is made to fasten it down.
It's folklore.
So
Everybody's
is
heard
that
that story.
considered, does that makes it more of a beged because it's tied to it?
No, if it's tied to you, Rashi says then you don't have a problem of chash that it'll blow up. Then you'll carry it.
So it's better.
If it's tied to you, it's better. Yeah. And according to Rashi, it's not just enough tied to you. You have to actually put it under your chin, right? It has to be tied around your neck. I don't know what it means around your neck, but I assume it means you have to have a strap underneath your chin to hold it in place, like a helmet.
Well, this fashion that came back to it didn't blow up, it would be high.
But this is the sugya. This is the sugya that discusses whether or not you're allowed to wear a hat. So if you want to be like a mizrachist who doesn't wear a hat, you'll say you think you black hatters are from? We're makbid on Taisha Shishita. You guys are Maratzim. You guys are the ones who are makel. Okay, you're makel to wear a hat. Don't it. Go brisk binnen. As a tonish.
Shrimel's not different.
Shrimel's not different at all. Yeah.
You remember the late in the 80s, the hats the ladies used to wear?
They used to wear very elaborate hats. Yeah.
I had a mizrachist who came to me with one time, like that, who told me how fruity it was. And then I went to the kiddush after shul, and I asked him about the tarubas over here and the tznius, and I asked him, is this also because you're
No, he said if the ladies wear big hats, everyone's in their own oil.
He said it's makbid on Shabbos, but not an Eruvin.
So again, let's focus on those Lego doors where there's a pin on top, a pin on bottom that fit into a little hole at the bottom of the doorway and the top of the doorway, and that's how you open the door.
It says Lego on top.
And it says Lego on top. That's right. So what happens if the bottom socket, the pin shifts out of the socket? So you're allowed to pop it back in, only in the base of Mikdash. Avaloy b'Medina, you're not allowed to do it b'Medina. And Rashi tells us the reason why you're not allowed to do it b'Medina is because we're afraid if it slipped out once, you're going to push it back in, which is allowed, but then you're going to tighten it up, and that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a malacha when you tighten it up in the hole. But if the top hinge falls out, that makes the door, that renders the door completely removed, and therefore kan v'kan aser, it's even going to be aser in the Beis HaMikdash to put it back. And Rashi says here, the kivin sheyatsa elyon kulay noifel, the whole thing falls down. V'hava kaboina, and it's considered boina on Shabbos. Because sover yesh binyan bechli, I'm sorry, that is referring to no, he also is a binyan bechli u'malach lahotra afil b'mikdash. Okay, so zok the Ohel Gemara, that's going to be a little bit weiter. That's going to be a little bit weiter. So anyway, it's considered binyan. In the mikdash, you're even allowed to put back the top, and the bottom you're even allowed to put back the Medina, because Rabbi Yehuda is going to hold that it's not going to be a problem of binyan. Let's see what the Gemara says. Tanraban, Sir Delas, Sheda, Teva, Umigdal. So now we're no longer talking about the doorway of a house. I'm sorry, I apologize. I didn't mention that the Mishnah also is not speaking about a house. So we have to review this. Machzir and Tzira Taklim the Mikdash, Rashi says it's Sheldelas, Chaloin, Sheda, Teva, Umigdal. We're talking about a cabinet. So we're not talking about something that's in a house. We're talking about a component of a keli. So they have openings from this side. The Tzir HaTachton, Chosman Shalayotza, Elyon, Noyach Lazir of Enkem Binyan. So the shaila over here is if there's binyan b'kelim. So the Gemara says over here, the Mishnah is saying that the reason why Rabbi Yehuda holds it's mutter even to put back the Elyon is because we're not talking about the doorway of a house where it's a shaila of binyan on the house. We're talking about kelim, and Rabbi Yehuda holds there is no iser binyan on kelim at all, and therefore it's allowed to be done because we're only referring to kelim over here and not to a binyan of a house. Tanrabban, Tzir Dela Sheda Tevo Migdal, the doorways, the hinges for doors that are for unmobile kelim, like these different boxes and cabinets and closets. So the law is b'mikdash machzirin. You're allowed to put it back in place in the base of mikdash because it would only be midrabanan that it would be also. But the Medina, b'mikdash machzirin b'Medina doichkin. You're allowed to push it in a little bit. Rashi says if it didn't completely get dislodged, you're allowed to put it back in. If it didn't leave the hole completely, then doichen. So you're not allowed to put it back if it's completely dislodged, but you're allowed to put it back in if it's getting a little bit out of center. But the upper hinge, kan v'kan lo yachzir, you should not put it back, even in the mikdash. Then there's a gzeir that you might fasten it down better, and that's not a question of binyan because we're still talking about kelim. That's a problem of makeh b'patish. And if you actually fastened any one of the hinges in the hole, that's makeh b'patish, and you're chayiv chatas. Shel bor v'shel dush v'shel yitzia. A bor, dush, and yitzia are things that are in the ground, so they're no longer mobile kelim. So now we're dealing with real binyan. Lo yachzir, you're not allowed to put anything back. Chayiv chatos, because that's binyan and it's not kelim that we're referring to over there. So again, we have a machlokas here. If there's yes binyan b'kelim or en binyan b'kelim, and that would determine whether or not you're allowed to put things back in the mikdash. Now we're talking about bandages. Machzirin retiya b'mikdash. What happens if someone has a bandage on? And most people, when you have a bandage, there's usually a dressing on the bandage, like some type of smearing, some type of shmiras. So if a kohen took off the bandage, and Rashi explains that a kohen got a wound on his hand, and he put a bandage on it in Boyjoy. We're not allowed to put a bandage on Shabbos, and then he had to do a voida on Shabbos or Yom Tov. So what does he do? We're going to discuss the issue of chatzitza or hefsek or ribui begodim, but for whatever reason, he's not allowed to do his avoida with that bandage on. So he took it off in order to do the avoida. Now the question is he allowed to put it back? So the problem is if we don't let him put it back, then what he might do is he might avoid doing the avoid in the first place. So therefore, we're going to let him put it back. So machzir and retiyah b'mikdash, a kohen who took a bandage off in the mikdash, we allow him to put it back. Avaloi b'medina, but not in the base of mikdash. If you took off a bandage, you're not allowed to put it back on Shabbos. I'm sorry?
He's finished the avodah for Shabbos and he wouldn't be able
No, the problem with putting the bandage back is you might smear some of the ointment.
No, yeah, so he said he can because he still has to do the avodah, right?
Right. So if it's a raisa, he wouldn't be allowed to do it. But if the only isser to put it back is a rabbanon, then we'll let him put it back, because if we don't let him put it back, he won't take it off. And if he won't take it off, he won't do the avodah.
Right. I'm saying so he's finished the avodah for Shabbos and we don't let him put it back. We shouldn't let him put it back.
No, because if we don't, then he won't start the avodah. If after he finishes the avodah, we don't let him put it back, then he won't want to take it off before the avodah.
He's done the avodah. I'm saying he's done the
I understand, but if you don't let him put it back, then the next week or the next kohen won't want to do it. Now, if you don't let me put a bandage back after I'm done my avodah,
in general, not
yeah,
for this particular avodah.
that's correct. Because otherwise, kohanim aren't going to want to take off bandages to do avodah. That's right. You're allowed to drive back, otherwise you won't go.
Yeah.
That's right.
You should know that if you see that, it boggles your mind. Literally, Hasidim getting out of cars nonchalantly on Shabbos with no,
with no rush.
You don't know what's going on.
So it's more in betchila, but if you want to put a bandage on a chetchila, kam v'kanosher, you're not allowed to put a bandage on Shabbos because we're worried when you smear it, there's an issue of memareach. Tanarabban, ritiya sheparshu me'alamaka, a bandage that fell off of a makkah. Machzir b'Shabbos, you're allowed to put it back on Shabbos. So this you didn't take off like the Kohen did. It fell off. If it fell off, you're allowed to put it back on Shabbos. If it didn't fall off, but it moved out of place a little bit, you can push it back into place higher up. If it slipped up a little bit, and you could pull it up a little bit to uncover the wound, and you could wash off the wound. And then you uncover the other side, so you could sort of shift the bandage out of the way so that you can access the makkah to clean it. But you're not allowed to clean the actual bandage. When you're cleaning it, you're going to be smearing or smoothing out some of the ointment that's on it. The mirach, and if you actually did smooth out some of the ointment, that's an issue there. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, who said that you're not allowed to take off the bandage on Shabbos. You're only allowed, or you're not allowed to put it back if it fell off. You're only allowed to move it up or down a little bit to access it. Amar B'chista, lo shanu el shapirsha al gabe kli. The whole machlokes is only if it fell onto a keli. That's where even Rabbi Yehuda holds its osir. Aval pirsha al gabe karka. But if it actually fell off onto the ground, divrei kol osir, then everybody would hold that it would be osir to put back. Amar Marbar Ravashi, I was in front of Abba, and Naftalei Abei Sadja. His bandage that he had fell off and it fell on his mattress. And he put it back on. Amar Lei, I told him, and don't you hold that the machlokes is only if it's al gabe kli, but al gabe karka it's osir. But we pass on like Rabbi Yehuda, and in your case, your bandage fell off on your bed, which should be similar to falling off onto a keli. And Rabbi Yehuda holds that there's osir. Yet you decided you would put the bandage back on. Rabbi Yehuda. He answered, Lo Shmili, I didn't hear this. I don't hold of Rabbi Yehuda's chomer, and I hold that if it fell on the floor, I wouldn't be able to put the bandage back, because that's like putting on a new bandage. But if it fell onto a keli, I'm allowed to put the bandage back on.
The bed's the keli.
I'm sorry?
And the bed is the keli.
And the bed will be considered a keli, correct? Because the question is do we perceive it like you're putting on a new bandage from scratch, or do we perceive it like we're just putting something on that fell? Yeah, if it falls onto the floor, we look at it like you're putting on a brand new bandage.
Yosy.
Yes, Machi.
I was under the impression that you're a new bandage without like creams you're allowed to use on Shabbos.
Say that again?
A new bandage you're allowed to put on without creams. Am I wrong with that? You know
you ask me halacha l'maisa?
Yeah, you don't know.
I'm not qualified. I'm not qualified.
Okay.
But I know all of these bandages that we're talking about are bandages that have an ointment. So you're saying halacha l'maisa now you're allowed to change the bandage because our bandages don't have ointment on them.
Or put on a new one if you have to.
You do have, right? You have to put on the shmirachs beforehand. Like you set them up. Right?
Oh, you put the polysporin on the bandage. If you know you have to change your bandage on Shabbos.
Change your bandage on Shabbos. You line up a bunch of bandages.
With the shmirach before.
Three ointments?
Yeah, bandages with polysporin.
They have pre-applied polysporin.
It's not.
So,
Yeah, I know.
It's not really sell the pre-cut cake.
It's embedded. It's not a cream. It's just embedded in the.
That's like buying for COVID. That's like buying a pre-packaged band-aid.
It's embedded in the
mesh.
It's not a cream.
That's much better.
Well, let's see Rashi. So David's asking why, if it fell on the floor, we consider it new. So let me just see Rashi. Rashi says over here. Rashi says, "In betchila shloisek shum b'yoyim v'koyin zel shulot tzarchavoda," then it would be usher. So let's see. Ritiya shapirsha shenafla, it fell off. from Medina Kamari, Lachinach Pirsha, Sharlat Vidas, okay? Machsir. El Shapirshal, Loishon, Tanakama, Shari Lachsira, El Shapirshal Gabi, please look Rashi, Ala Kor or Ala Kesses. But Agabi Akarka is Kilichat Chiladam. So the Svara must be, I guess, one something, if it falls on the kid, it's not like totally fell off. It's still like, it's still close by, but if it fell on the floor, it's like completely off. I don't know, but that's what Rashi says. Rashi says that it depends on whether or not it fell to the floor or not, because if it falls to the floor, we look at it like it's completely off.
The other case we said where if you would smear the ointment of the papas, right?
If you smear onto the issue of the Mareach, and that's an issue that rises.
So why would they make a gezerah not to do it at all? Because it comes to the
Why wouldn't they make a gezerah not to do what? You're not allowed to put a bandage on Shabbos. You're only allowed to return the bandage that was on before.
Slip to one side or slip to the other side, and you can do it.
Right.
Big gezerah, you still might smear it, right?
So you want to know? We have two opinions. Rabbi Yehuda is more machmer and says you're not allowed to. If the bandage fell off, you're not allowed to put it back at all. But if it's shifted, you're allowed to adjust it. So you're asking me why is Rabbi Yehuda more machmer?
If you shift it, you still have the problem of smearing, no?
I guess he held that it's not likely that you're going to smear ointment on a bandage that never came off, that just shifted, and you're readjusting.
That would be a typical case where a runner will make a gezerah because you're going to be over.
Well, I guess in all these cases, the chash is that you might smear the ointment, and I guess they couldn't prohibit it completely, so they have to decide how to enforce it, where it would be most likely to be over.
I can give you a svara for the keli not being lechatchila, meaning mitchila.
Why it fell on the keli, there should be a svara to allow you to put it back.
Right. And the svara could go like this, because if a person takes it off intentionally to put it back on,
Right.
he's not going to put it on the floor. He's going to find some kind of a keli to put it on, right?
Right.
People put it on the keli. But when you put something, but if he wants to throw it away, meaning he wants,
That's where he'll let it go to the floor.
it goes on the floor. So therefore, if it falls off on the KD, so it's still within that idea of putting it back on. Falling on the floor is already showing it already falls into
It's
that.
an interesting svara, but the problem halachically, it's much worse if you took it off on purpose temporarily than if it fell off. Because the machlokes in our Gemara is if it fell off, are you allowed to put it back? But our Mishnah is talking about when you took it off. If you took it off, you're for sure not allowed to put it back. The only time we allowed you to put it back if you took it off is only if you're a kohen, because we're afraid kohanim with wounds are going to refrain from doing avodah. So the fact that if I comparing it to something that I would take off intentionally, taking something off intentionally actually makes it worse, not better.
True, we don't have to compare. Okay, so then we don't have to compare to somebody taking it off intentionally, but still the idea.
It's more removed from me.
Right.
You're trying to say since if it fell on the floor, most people when it falls on the floor are throwing it away. That shows that when you put it back on after it's on the floor, it's lechatchila. I hear. No, and that's a good story. That's probably the story, right? Beautiful. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. So the Gemara weiter. Kosher nima b'mikdash. In the base of mikdash, they had clay shear, such as harps. So what happens if a harp string tore? So now the Levium can't play the beautiful melody with the shear properly. So the halacha is kosher nima b'mikdash. You're allowed to tie it. You're allowed to tie it if it tore. Avaloi b'medina, but of course not in the base of mikdash. You're not allowed to tie up a string. Now, what if you have a new harp that you need to restring it? Kind usher, that will even be usher in the base of English.
They're allowed to play shear on Shabbos?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So let's see Rashi. I think Rashi discussed it. Nimas kinar shall shir leviim lekarbon im nifsaka b'Shabbos. The Gemara Mefarish time, the Gemara is going to explain the kasava machshirei mitzvah shaloi hayu yachal asoysim espoel. A machshir mitzvah you could have done yesterday because it didn't tear yesterday. The hayom nifsaka doiches haShabbos. The avagav the catcher av malacha b'mesach Shabbos. Even though tying something is a malacha deraisa, but you're allowed to do it because it's machshir mitzvah and it's needed in order to say the shir on the carbon. So frank the Gemara. We're many. Nimas kinar shenifsaka. If the string of a harp tore, loy hayakashra, you're not allowed to tie it. Unlike the Mishnah that says you are allowed to re-knot it, the Brayso says you're not allowed to. Ela Oinva, you could only make a bow. So it's a steer between our Mishnah and this Brayso. Harabanon Harab Eliezer. L'Rab Eliezer, according to Rab Eliezer, the Amar Machshira Mitzvah Doichines Shabbos, and Rashi brings down that Rab Eliezer holds that you're allowed to set a fire up to actually build a knife in order to make a bris on Shabbos. So you're allowed to do preparation in order to be Mekayim Mitzvah. So according to Rab Eliezer, you're allowed to do Machshira Mitzvah Koshra. Our Mishnah is Rab Eliezer, he holds you're allowed to tie it. Why are you allowed to tie it? Because you're allowed to do Machshira Mitzvah. But L'Rabbanan, the Amri Ein Doichen, according to Rabbanan, who hold that Machshir Mitzvah is not Doichen Shabbos Oinva, you make a bow, and it's going according to the Shita that a bow is not a violation of Shabbos. Frankly, more, this is not a good teretz, because even Rabbi Eliezer, if you want to say that our Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Eliezer, where Machshir Mitzvah you're allowed to violate Shabbos for, well then I feel lechatchila nami. Then even lechatchila, if you're making a harp, if you need to do a deraisa to make that harp, according to Rabbi Eliezer, you're allowed to do it. You're allowed to build a fire to make a knife, to do a bris. So you can't say that our Mishnah holds kosher because of the shita of Rabbi Eliezer, because clearly our Mishnah does not hold like Rabbi Eliezer. Our Mishnah does not allow you to be over deraisa for machshir mitzvah. Elo loy kasha will have to come up with a different shot in our Mishnah. Ha Rabbi Yehuda v'ha Rabbanan. It's a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. Who is the Rabbi Yehuda? Zok Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda says, the Omar Aniva Av Malacha Mesech Shabbos. It's a machlokes whether or not making a bow is a malacha deraisa. Rabbi Yehuda holds making a bow is a malacha deraisa. So there's no benefit to making a bow over making a kshira. So therefore, you might as well make a kshira because the kshira works better. And when you make the kshira, the instrument will play better than if you only make an aniva. So if you hold aniva as a deraisa, so you have to be over a deraisa anyway to fix this kinar, you might as well make a kshira. There are brayos that says to make an aniva holds that making an aniva is not deraisa, so therefore you're better off fixing this harp through an aniva because it's not a deraisa. Like Rabbi Yehuda Varban. We still need to know who Rabbi Yehuda holds like Lagabi the Machlokes of Machshir Mitzvah. If Rabbi Yehuda happens to hold like Rabbi Eliezer, well then you have the same problem. So our Mishnah for sure cannot be going according to Rabbi Eliezer because our Mishnah doesn't allow you to repair this midaraisa. Ella loy kasha. So the problem is if it's going according to Rabbi Eliezer, and if it's not going according to Rabbi Eliezer, then you'll have a problem. Then you'll have a problem with their bond. So Rashi says as follows: you have to hold like Rabbi Eliezer that you're allowed to do machshir mitzvah. Why is it usher to do when you're building a kina from scratch? Why would it be usher to make new strings if we have to go according to Rabbi Eliezer? Why can it not be going according to the Rabbanan? Because according to the Rabbanan, you're not allowed to do machshir mitzvah, and therefore you wouldn't be able to make a kshira at all on Shabbos. We have to introduce Rab Shimon, who holds it makes a difference as to whether or not you could have done it before. The Tanya Ben Levi, a Ben Levi whose harp had string tore, Koshra, you're allowed to tie it. Rab Shimon Omer Oinva. Rab Shimon says you're only allowed to make a bow. So it's this machlokes that's the machlokes between our Mishnah and our Brisa. Rab Shimon Ben Lazar Omer Afi Einim Hashmes as a koil. Making an aniva doesn't work because it'll ruin the sound of the harp. Ella, he holds mishalshal milamayla milamata v'koich milamayla, mishalshal milamayla v'koich milamata, which means is when on the harps, I know like on our guitars, there's a place where you can wind up the string and there's extra string there. So by the harp as well, either at the upper side or the lower side, there was a spool of string. And if it tears, just get rid of the part that tore and extend out a new string from the bottom spool or from the upper spool, depending on what the spool was. But you have to create a brand new string. Or you could say everyone is going according to the Rabbanan. It depends on where the string tore. If the string tore in the middle, then let's see Rashi. I don't, it's already 5:57. I don't have a clor, so we'll stop here and we'll do over this shtickle tomorrow. Now we're right on the daf. Now we're right on daf. So that means Kuf Gimel.
Shkoyach.
So Kuf Gimel will be on Erev Shabbos. Kuf Dalid will be on Shabbos, and Kuf Hey, which is only one Amud, will be on Sunday. Which means on Sunday we'll be able to do this. We'll be able to finish the Masechta and start Psachim. Shkoyach. So we want to encourage as many people as possible to join for Psachim. A and B is we're going to reach them Abbasim a week from Thursday on the Yortzeit of Moshe Zolti on Masechtas Erev. That I believe Zolti and Shmuel Eruvin are involved in sponsoring, and there's more sponsorships opportunity for whoever would be interested. Please contact Shmuel. Have a very good day.
Shkoyach, Yosy, shkoyach.
Yeah.